Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, continues to be a tremendous amount going on. We continue to be under a five-alarm fire on the attempted coup on the part of Donald Trump. But on the other hand, I want to begin today with what is going on with COVID, because I want to make sure this is not being lost, as this is also a five-alarm fire. Just yesterday, we had record cases, record hospitalizations, 1,400 deaths, 34 states seeing their highest seven-day average, 45 states seeing an upward trend in new cases, a positivity rate above 8%. COVID is new guidelines to do Thanksgiving outside. COVID is ravaging the United States, and this truly is the five-alarm fire. So just to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, I'm going to start with COVID today and Matthew.
Thanks, Jeff. So as you mentioned, lots of new records, two big new records. It's not just a devastating time. It's a very vulnerable time right now as people are COVID fatigued and hearing a vaccine is just around the corner and might let their guards down, and they should not. You mentioned the record day, Jeff. Tuesday, over 136,000 cases, the most ever. 1,420 deaths reported, the most since summer. A record for all-time current hospitalization, 62,000. We've got more and more states sounding the alarm about bed capacity and hospital staffing shortages. Fauci telling Jake it could get much worse, and warns just because help is on the way, don't stop following public health measures because a vaccine is coming. And obviously, the biggest public health measure being masks, the new CDC guidance. We're seeing more and more state leaders urge people to stay home entirely, and more states moving toward restrictions or pausing restrictions in place. We're seeing more scenes of long testing lines. We're also hearing a lot of ramped up warnings about Thanksgiving, as you mentioned, between travel and family gatherings and students heading home. It definitely seems like Thanksgiving will be a big challenge. We know family gatherings are now considered a serious common source of spread. Looking around the key regions, if you look at the CNN map, there are 15 states, which I think is the most at any one time, in that deep red shade, which means over 50% increase in a week. And as you mentioned, Jeff, 34 states seeing their highest averages yesterday for new cases. Texas becomes the first state to cross 1 million total cases, which if Texas were a country, that would be enough to put it in the top 10 list of countries for cases. A record in Texas yesterday of almost 11,000 cases. Omar Jimenez has an excellent piece really bringing this down to the human level in El Paso, which he notes is suffering in ways like no other. 1 in 30 people in El Paso have COVID. There are grieving families. There are more mobile morgues. There are empty businesses and churches, and there's this ongoing lockdown there. In the Midwest, Illinois tops 12,000 cases in one day yesterday, highest ever. Governor still says a stay-at-home order statewide is possible. Wisconsin's governor signed an order advising people there to stay home. He says, please cancel the happy hours, dinner parties, sleepovers, and playdates. We've got Adrian Broadus up in Chicago on the Midwest line. Nevada's governor calling for a 2-week voluntary, quote, stay-at-home 2.0. And Oklahoma down to 7% ICU capacity. New Jersey marking a 6-month high in new cases, new measures, restrictions on bars and restaurants and other things starting tomorrow. And then there's Florida, which is continuing to rise and which has taken a lot of fire on how it's handled data over the year. Florida has hired a data analyst who has no health background and who's flooded Twitter and other sites with conspiracy theories, arguments against mask mandates, and data interpretations designed to argue with the experts. The governor's office told Randy Kaye that he is not primarily a COVID data analyst, but it sure seems like he was hired after all of these statements that were out there. We're sorting through all this to alert reporting. Randy is filing for 360, and we're working up for digital as well. In terms of the health front, we talked about the new CDC guidance on masks. They're not just for the other person anymore. The new guidance reads that they act as, quote, filtration for personal protection, citing several studies that show masks can reduce risks by more than 70% in cases. Obviously, there's the vaccine front. We're looking for results from other companies like Moderna any day. Fauci saying healthcare workers will be heavily prioritized in the rollout. But there are still a ton of questions about the distribution plans and how those priority decisions will be made and how, by whom and when. HHS also says the government will start distributing Eli Lilly's antibody treatment this week, but a lot of officials and doctors note there are a lot of concerns about getting it out, given all the IV infusion requirements there. We're hearing more in a briefing right now from the Infectious Diseases Society about West-Midwest spread. Definitely seems worst there, and a WHO briefing at 11. Sanjay has got a piece that rolled out this morning on, yes, deaths are high, and it's a tragic number, but the number of deaths relative to the number of cases is dropping. So we explore why. Elizabeth Cohen and Jacqueline Howard also available live on the health lines. On education, one of the nation's largest school districts, Philadelphia, will not go to hybrid learning next week as planned. Philly will stay virtual until further notice because of spread. Obviously, lots of districts confronting the post-Thanksgiving and post-New Year's plans at this point, and we've got Biana on the education line. We continue to track the impact of COVID on sports. The NFL noting that the latest testing window results reveal a jump in cases, 15 players compared to 8 last time. We've got those 2 postponed weekend SEC games, Alabama, LSU, and Texas A&M, Tennessee. We've got the wrap pieces, of course. Nick Watt today for 3, 5, 7, 9. Athena Jones for 4, 6, 8, and 10.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. So there's really a ton of really bad news on the COVID front. Does anybody have any thoughts on COVID?
Hey, Jeff, just one thing in the wake of the CDC's new mask advisory, protecting yourself. Maybe we've done this somewhere. I'm sorry if I missed it, but there was information about the different types of masks and how much protection they offer. And so you've got people wearing bandanas and you've got people wearing N95s. And I do think we should have a segment. Sanjay obviously would be amazing at this, and maybe he's done it already. If I missed it again, I'm sorry. But to tell people like what type of mask will protect them the most. And again, I know it's fairly obvious that the type of mask that the healthcare workers wear, like the N95s, are more protective. But I do think a gradation of what it means, what kind of mask you should have. You know, sometimes you see people wearing 2 masks. They have like a cloth mask and a paper mask. Is that better? Is that worse? Should you do that if you can't get an N95? I just think a segment on what type of mask is most protective to those around you and also to you yourself in terms of the screening of up to 70 or 80% of the potential particles that could harm either you or someone around you.
So that's definitely something we can revisit with Sanjay. And the other thing I would just add too, as well, Sanjay said this on New Day this morning, it was a really good point. The hospitalizations, as Matthew mentioned, at a record all-time high today, coming about a month after cases that were about half this amount a month ago. So look at a month from here, where are we going to be in hospitalizations? It's absolutely frightening.
It's Paula calling from Canada. Can you guys hear me?
Sure can, Paula. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't think we can overstate the risk to Thanksgiving. So Canada is a month out from its Thanksgiving. It is a dumpster fire here right now. Our cases are growing exponentially, and public health officers can't get a hold of it. And remember, we have mask wearing here, 80 to 90% in certain jurisdictions. And as I said, those private family gatherings for Thanksgiving were absolutely catastrophic. And I think it's just worth continuing to emphasize like that, as we have been on the air already.
Yep. And you raised the point. Obviously, that's North America, but we are going to have to return at some point, probably next week, to making sure we're covering the international COVID story on CNN US as well.
We did do that story for digital, so it's up there, and people can look at the Thanksgiving numbers. So they're there. The warning's there.
Got it. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Matthew, is there anything else domestic while I have you?
Yeah, let me just mention the storm. Ada is now a hurricane again, approaching Florida for a landfall tomorrow, strengthened overnight. The track has a landfall of up to a Cat 1 north of Tampa. Hurricane watches up along the Florida Gulf Coast. A lot of flooding expected in the Tampa area and surrounding, and we'll talk about how to cover tomorrow. But for today, it's Chad and Tom in the Weather Center, and that's really the only other thing.
Good. Okay, thank you. All right, now let's move to politics, election, White House, Washington. Let's start with David Chalian, please.
Good morning, Jeff. Virginia will have most of the five-alarm fire stuff. The Biden, President-elect Biden, you saw yesterday before cameras, really working to lower the temperature on this, saying that nothing is sort of hampering his ability to proceed with his transition for now, and obviously he called the president's behavior an embarrassment, but it is his entire mission was to turn down the temperature on this moment of concern. We are looking to see if he adds a Veterans Day event to his schedule today. There's not one currently on his schedule, but wouldn't be surprised if he added one. So we'll be on the lookout for that and let folks know. We don't expect any staff announcements today because of the Veterans Day holiday. But tomorrow and Friday this week, as it comes to an end, we are on the lookout for some big West Wing announcements. Perhaps Chief of Staff will be first, obviously leading contender for that, longtime advisor Ron Klain. But we will be on the lookout for those kinds of announcements, again, for the Biden team to show that they're proceeding apace despite the president's continued refusal to concede and his team's push for these baseless lawsuits and recounts and what have you. In terms of the Georgia runoff elections, Kyung La is on the ground in Georgia for us, and obviously these campaigns are well underway. TV ads have been flying. Surrogates are making their way. Today we see Marco Rubio joining Kelly Loeffler on the trail, and perhaps Perdue as well. You saw Ossoff on AC 360 last night saying that Democrats in Georgia have never been more motivated, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution editorial atop the paper this morning slamming Loeffler and Perdue for their baseless claims about election fraud for which there is no evidence. I'm sure the AJC editorial is not going to mean a whole heck of a lot to their voters, but it's certainly not how any candidate would want to kick off what is an 8-week sprint of a campaign with the battle for Senate control hanging in the balance there. So Ken Law's on the ground and is able to take a look at all of that today for us. And I think that's where we start.
Okay, so before we move to the five-alarm fire part of it, David, can you just update us on where the vote count stands? Obviously, the popular vote is now just about at 5 million, which I continue to emphasize is something that we should highlight. And we still have races to officially call in Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, and Alaska. Can you just give us a quick update on where we are on that?
Sure. Alaska, there was like 70,000 votes that just got reported, and the folks at decision desks are taking a look at that. So Alaska may be projectable for both the Senate race there and the presidential in just the next little bit here. So be on the lookout for that. In Georgia, we're awaiting the counties to certify their votes to the state, which needs to happen by Friday. So that county level certification deadline is sort of the next thing to look for in Georgia, as I believe we're at about a 14,000 vote lead for Joe Biden right now in Georgia. So, and in North Carolina, ballots, as you know, can be accepted through tomorrow. So once we have a sense of the ballots that have been brought in there, you saw that Cal Cunningham, the Democratic Senate candidate, conceded his election there, and Tom Tillis won that race. So once we see what comes in by the November 12th deadline there in North Carolina, that race may end up being projectable by the end of this week as well. And in Arizona, we're now at, I think, down to nearly a 13,000, something like that.
Just under 13,000. Just under 13,000.
Oh, sorry, just under 13,000 lead, and for Joe Biden there, and we know there's some, I don't know, 40 to 50,000 votes still outstanding. So we await for those votes to be reported in Arizona.
So I think just to put a button on what David is saying, the Arizona race continues to tighten, which continues to make that call of that race really look like a mistake. I mean, Biden's probably going to win it, but it should not have been called the way AP and Fox did. And the Georgia margin has continued to grow and is quite substantial now. So I want to continue to make sure we're pointing all of this out, especially with the 5 million popular vote gap, which is only going to continue to grow as it moves past 95% of the total vote in. Okay, Virginia, 5-alarm fire.
5-alarm fire. Okay. To begin by quoting Collinson, the Trump administration is taking on the characteristics of a tottering regime, loyalty tests, attacks on the military chain of command, deepening bunker mentality, and increasingly delusional claims of victory. Trump, who we have not seen for almost a week, we will see at 11 o'clock for a Veterans Day event at Arlington. Trump has canceled his vacation. But all of the coup attempts continue. The OMB is continuing to advise agencies on next year's budget as if nothing has changed. And one really important developing thing we're focusing on today is the CDC is on hold, and Kristen Holmes is going to tackle the pandemic response and whether this is this year's version of what we talked about with 9/11, that no one can move forward on this because of there is no cooperation. John Podesta and Andy Carr saying a delayed transition could hinder economic recovery, slow the vaccine, and put American lives at risk. Then we have the purge at the Pentagon. 4 senior administration officials have been fired or resigned since Monday to be replaced by Trump loyalists, and in one case a conspiracy theorist, 2 others who are associated with Devin Nunes now in acting jobs. State Department employees are removing from these Pompeo remarks yesterday, and there is no movement on briefing on national security. At the same time that's all going on, the facts about the counts are emerging day by day. The New York Times and AP have done extensive reports on really how smooth this election was. This Pennsylvania grace period vote, we learned, really comes out to about 10,000 ballots. So even if they were not counted, it's not enough to change in that state. These Erie, Pennsylvania allegations of backdating ballots were retracted. And then just to note the role of Ben Ginsburg in all of this, the Republican key person, as we've said over and over again, but now saying it's completely unsubstantial charges about elections being rigged and is not right. Meantime, the Republicans continue to enable. The most recent really flagrant example of this is Roy Blunt, who said on Sunday that these results were unlikely to change. Yesterday came out and said, in fact, he may have not been defeated at all. Rubio to add to the long list of Republicans who are allowing this behavior. And then just to note on the Trump and COVID front, there have been no, in the midst of the theme that Matthew described of how bad things are getting, there are no task force meetings, there are no briefings. Atlas aggressively attacking Fauci as a political animal, so they're doing nothing on that front. And I think that's what we got.
I think that's a good note, by the way. When we do COVID, there's just no leadership on the current administration's part. Okay, so let's open it up for thoughts on the election, the administration, the transition, or anything anybody wants to bring up.
2 things, Jeff. I'm just astounded that the president just attacked by name on Twitter the poor guy who was on at the end of our show, the Republican election official from Philadelphia. I mean, he's probably going to have to go into hiding now. And he might be worth bringing back after that also, because it's just crazy.
I agree. To Jim's point, the interview was fantastic on New Day, was really important, and I think Jim raises a really good note. We should bring him back at some point today, and we should note what the president has done to him. It was a really good interview on New Day.
And then the other thing is that the David Ignatius piece in the Washington Post this morning really seems to point to where this is going, that Trump is just so furious at the military intelligence people and Gina Haspel and Bill Barr and everybody for blocking him from releasing sensitive intelligence information about the Russia stuff. And because I was wondering why Don Jr. is tweeting all caps, released the intelligence for the last couple of days. It's going to get dangerous.
Yeah, well, I believe. Go ahead, Virginia.
Yeah, we do have most, if not all, of that reporting, and it's either out or about out, so we can lean in that direction.
Right, but I think to that reporting and to Jim's point, this is what's going on. This is what's incredibly dangerous, and this is just degrading every institution we have, and it's all because of his peak, and he now wants that stuff out, and I really think we have to hit that head on. So thank you, Jim. Other thoughts?
Hey, Demetra, I was just going to say the same thing as Jim about this tweet, but also how damning it is to the civil service, which if you look at the last 4 years, it is these workers that we had on over and over the last few days that are just so clearly the bureaucracy of the U.S. government that end up being the heroes of the U.S. government. And I do think there's a tie-in to COVID as far as essential workers. And I just wonder if it's time to zoom out, because if you look at the last 4 years, over and over and over again, the institutions that have saved us from utter chaos, even though it feels like utter chaos, have been these workers. So it's just interesting if you think of the imagery of the last week, the poll workers themselves, the Postal Service, these are not glamorous people, but I think it's just remarkable of what we've seen from the U.S. Civil Service over the last few years.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
Hi. Yeah, I was just going to say that we have had some really great interviews, and I just wonder if we can get clips of those and be able to have them on digital and on social, that we can make them snackable and shareable, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's out there, and we have some great stuff that airs on TV that sometimes, we may be able to create in a way that makes it easy to counter from our air in a way that is more shareable, like the guy, like Schmidt, which I thought was fabulous of Berman this morning.
Yep. Other thoughts?
Jeff, I think we should continue to put pressure on the president's enablers, particularly Republicans in Congress, Republican senators. Every Republican senator who has not spoken out, and that is about 43 of them, it deserves to be pressured. They know that the president is making this up. They know that he's wrong, but they don't want to. They're wimps, and putting pressure, whether it's Marco Rubio or even outgoing senators who have a conscience like Lamar Alexander or Ben Sasse, calling them out for his, you call it a coup, I think puts pressure on them and at least hopefully forces them to defend the indefensible.
Okay, other thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, just to follow up on two things. One, first, what Sam said, since that just happened. It's pretty plain and simple. It's politics over country. I mean, you can't say it more simply than that. And is that really what we want our leadership to be, is politics before country? I don't. I don't know about everybody else, but I don't. Country should come first. And in this case, it isn't. And that's part of the call out, but that's the conversation. Politics over country. These are supposed to be the people who are standing up for the foundations and the Constitution, et cetera, but they're not. They're putting politics first. That's the first thing. I think it's pretty simple. The second thing is on the Al Schmidt story, which was great to have, and there's just so many examples of things like this around Pennsylvania. I think we should go back and do Snapshot Pennsylvania, almost a TikTok of all of the allegations of improprieties there. Philly, Erie, the postal inspection in Erie where the guy recanted that ballots were post-dated or predated. What's been going on in Philly, take it sort of point by point, almost a TikTok of allegation of some kind of fraud or impropriety, and here's the reality, and just focus on Pennsylvania as a highlight. Put Pennsylvania in the spotlight. Here's what's been alleged. It was a centerpiece because of obviously the Four Seasons landscaping company press conference and all that stuff, and you can use all of that in the story too, and use things like, again, the Fox News correspondent in Philadelphia multiple times on Fox said there are no signs of impropriety here. He showed a photograph taken by a Republican poll watcher who was 6 feet away from the woman who was going through the ballots. All that's from Fox. All of those kinds of things that debunk sort of every allegation along the way, just to highlight for everybody how ridiculous this is in one place. Just literally go through them all and debunk.
Okay. Other thoughts? Okay, is there anything else in Washington?
No.
Okay. International.
So on the election, internationally, you've really just got this baffled international community. Nick Robertson is on that, looking at the major allies who are reaching out to Biden, Macron, Boris, Merkel. We've also got Tony Blair on Alan Paul, which will be a really good guest today. But that's really the international strand on the election. COVID's a big one as well, really very similar kind of line to what we were talking about on the domestic angle on this. COVID sort of ravaging the world, yet there are these glimmers of hope. The EU has ordered 300 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine. Russia came out today and said that its Sputnik 5 vaccine would be 92% effective. Obviously, we take that with a grain of salt, but still, it's kind of the idea that there could be multiple vaccines ultimately is a positive one. Matthew Chance is on that. Fred is on the EU line. But the numbers are just going up everywhere. 500 people died in the UK yesterday, the deadliest day since March. Salma is on that. And then the other story I wanted to flag is Hong Kong, where we're seeing basically the complete erosion of democracy. Earlier, China said that any lawmakers in Hong Kong who are dissenting voices who aren't patriotic should just be removed. And then within hours of that, Carrie Lam removed 4 lawmakers. 15 others have said that they're going to resign tomorrow, and Ivan Watson is on that. But we're really all election and COVID focused.
Thank you. Business.
Jeff, good morning. We are also election COVID focused, and as well as misinformation running rampant since the election. Stocks poised to bounce back today. Dow futures up 220 points. Christine Romans is up on that, and also focusing on the economic hangover awaiting President-elect Biden. Obviously, COVID out of control. Millions are still jobless, and Congress may oppose big stimulus. Not helping matters is the messy Trump-Biden transition, which we've spoken about, which will certainly derail that much-needed stimulus. Christine Romans is up and available on that, and Allison Kosik is available from the New York Stock Exchange. Jeff, a good corporate story breaking this hour. We are watching Pfizer this morning. According to SEC filings, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla cashed in more than $5.5 million worth of Pfizer stock on Monday. This was the same day that the drug maker said its experimental COVID-19 shot was more than 90% effective. Paul LaMonica does note, though, that this is a pre-planned sale. At best, a horrible PR blunder. At worst, the company timed the announcement around those options kick in. Pfizer just emailing us moments ago defending it, saying that these were predetermined plans managed through a third-party stock administrator. But as Paul notes, CEOs can always delay these sales. So we have CNN Business and Christine Romans up and available on that. Just want to highlight overnight, Chinese State Administration for Regulations. This is China's top market regulator, announcing guidelines intended to prevent big internet monopolies. This led to $250 billion wiped out of the Chinese stock exchange from companies like Alibaba and Tencent. The fear stateside is that American tech giants, it may embolden similar efforts here in Washington. As we know, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg arguing that China's growing tech groups are a competitive threat, but more aggressive antitrust action from Beijing could weaken that claim. Brian Fung is up and available on that. And of course, in misinformation, Brian is also tracking YouTube, which told us late yesterday that a video wrongly claiming Biden lost his status as president-elect did not violate its standards. The video racking up more than 1 million views and shared widely. It was also a top performer on Facebook. Of course, the main source of this video was a tweet which was removed by Trump advisor Pam Bondi. Some context from Biden. The video, as opposed to text, is much harder to analyze, would need someone to actually watch the videos, or the company would need to rely on algorithms. The one company, though, that can actually do this is Google, the parent company of YouTube. So we are tracking that throughout the day. Brian is up and available on that, and that's where we begin.
Thank you very much. So before we move on to digital, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Hey, digital. Hey, Jeff, we had 42 million uniques yesterday. We had one story over 3 million uniques and 5 over 2 million. So the audience is really here with us. The top story was Collinson. The Collinson we led with yesterday morning on Trump making sure the transition will be as turbulent as his presidency. Other top getters were the presidential vote results page, and that we looked to that out of the map on the home pages, for instance. Barr telling USAs to investigate fraud, the Pentagon resignations, and the DLE on politics and the election and transition. Top video on mobile web was the Coons video saying Republicans are saying to him privately, congratulations, and the desktop video on Bolton saying that Pompeo had just eviscerated his own credibility. Right now, leading the site and unique is the Collinson piece of the morning about the Trump administration's actions more akin to a dictatorship, and that's just under 30,000 uniques, which is a really high number. Of course, we'll stay on top of all the Trump chaos. From Collinson, we have a great piece also from Jeremy Herb that's up right now about the danger, kind of the incrustation of the people that the Trumpers are putting into the government bureaucracy, including taking some political appointees and putting them into civil service jobs, and the danger that that presents to any transition, but more importantly, to the next administration. We'll stay on top of the transition plans. We have a great piece right now on the diversity of Biden's potential cabinet, and we illustrate that diversity with images on our home pages. And we have a piece looking at the foreign leaders who are moving to acknowledge Biden's victory. Right now, more foreign leaders have done that than Republican senators. And it's the same thing that, Western countries often do when there is a transfer of power in countries, and we want to encourage the legitimate person who won the election. We do that, and we ignore the dictator who refuses to go. So strange parallels there. We have coming forward, we'll stay on top of fact checks. Cynthia, thank you so much for that excellent reminder. We are cutting the beautiful pieces we have from AIR for VOD to share through social and on our site. We are definitely doing that, and we'll do it for Commissioner Schmidt from this morning, a new day. We have a Harry Inton piece coming up on how Biden is actually widening his lead, which will also do well, and a great Daniel Dale fact check coming up on the RNC falsehoods, false tweets. So we'll see all that, as well as the stimulus story, transition, and the bad news for the millions of Americans who need help with stimulus. We have a piece on Biden and the economy coming from business. And we have a lighter-hearted piece on all the hotels are already sold out in D.C. for January 20th. So people are not really, some people are not believing what Trump says. Finally, I'll say that we have really good stuff coming on coronavirus up now and coming. We have a piece on the hospital shortages. We're going to El Paso, El Paso right coming out. As Matthew said, 1 in 30 people in that county has coronavirus. And we have news you can use for our users. Holiday advice, both for
your college kids who may be coming home for the holiday, they should quarantine before they come home, basically, inside the dorm for 2 weeks. And also we have a video from Dr. Nguyen on how to have a safe Thanksgiving, which basically involves being outside. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Marcus. John.
Good morning, Jeff. So there are two stories today to the transition mess and the escalating COVID crisis, and we're devoting equal time to both. On the transition chaos, John Hart was at the White House this morning, as we just mentioned, Trump continuing to lash out, spreading all these lies. And we will see him for his first official appearance in nearly a week when he heads to Arlington at 11 a.m. for a Veterans Day ceremony. So we'll watch for that. And then on the Biden side, MJ Lee in Wilmington on the transition team meeting, continuing to show the stark contrast to how Trump is handling things, projecting calm and confidence. We will get to Jeff Zeleny on his reporting on early names being floated for a cabinet. Once again, just Biden keeping a sharp focus on the transition moving forward while there's all this chaos on the Trump side. We do have reporter whips built throughout the day to really land on the degradation of institutions as this transition mess just continues to tease out. Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, the shakeup there, the loyalists in power, and just the growing sense of alarm among the military and civilian officials. Kristen Holmes on just a vast array of agencies stalled due to the transition in limbo. A big focus on the CDC, obviously with the pandemic raging. Kylie Atwood continuing to report out on diplomats overseas just left in a state of limbo and angry over Pompeo's move. Vivian Salama has her own good reporting on the Trump's ousting of officials and how that could have lasting effects well into a Biden administration. And Jim Sciutto next hour, along with Ellie Honig, is going to do a very long fact check just on the flurry of flimsy accusations, touching on some of what Michael said earlier, looking at these different cases that the Trump team is trying to float. There's gaping holes in all of them. We're going to point that out and discuss it with Ellie Honig. We have a number of former diplomatic and national security officials booked throughout the day to really get into how all of this is just undermining these important institutions. David LaPan with Jim and Poppy, as well as Jack Goldsmith, a former DOJ official under Bush, who's very outspoken about how damaging this is. We have former NSC senior official under Bush, John Bellinger, with Brianna, echoing that sentiment. And then Corey Shockey, former close advisor to Mattis, on with Brooke on Trump and how he's just damaging the norms of the military and the long-lasting impact of this. We also have, with John King, Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman on the situation in Pennsylvania, and Susan Glasser. The vote count continues. John Avalon, John King, and David Challian each doing magic wall hits on that. We'll show those growing numbers. The popular vote. Also want to focus on when these key 6 states are going to certify. Those are notable dates. The first one is in Georgia at the end of next week, and they go through December 1st. Diane Gallagher is in Atlanta on the GOP Civil War. We hear from Loeffler this morning. She appears with Rubio. And then at 10:30, the Georgia Secretary of State with his daily briefing. We'll see what comes of that. And Brian Fung on social media companies, how they can't get control of the right-wing misinformation about the election outcome. So some good reporting that we want to highlight. On coronavirus, it's Elizabeth Cohen and Dr. Sanjay, with obviously the lead on that is just the superlatives, the exploding cases, highest single day of new cases since the pandemic began, 45 states showing upward trends, plus the Thanksgiving warnings. Omar Jimenez's El Paso piece is strong. That's getting on this morning. Adrian Broadus on the Midwest issues. Athena Jones has a COVID rat piece at 3. Brianna is going to keep a focus on vaccines. We have Dr. Stephen Thomas, the lead investigator with the Pfizer vaccine trials. A lot to unpack with him. John King has Dr. Ali Makdad from IHME with some very specific modeling, looking at when each state is going to hit ICU capacity based on current trends. And it's happening very soon in a number of states. And finally, international whips, including Shasta Darlington on Bolsonaro's just outrageous comments about the deaths there.
Okay, thank you. Washington,
Good morning. At 4 o'clock, Pam's in for Jake today. We've got Caitlin with a donut and Arlette with a donut on, of course, Trump and Biden and all the transition chaos. And news today, Senator Gillibrand joins us as well. We're requesting for Al Schmidt to come back now that Trump is attacked. Waiting on that. And then, of course, David Challing at the Magic Wall as the vote counting continues. Athena has our COVID wrap with all the dire news there, and Sanjay, of course, as well. Barbara has her piece on the state of the military this Veterans Day, and then Kyung looking at the Georgia Senate races.
And in the Situation Room, we'll also be following both 5-alarm fires, COVID, all the record cases, deaths, hospitalizations, positivity rate, Thanksgiving has to be outside, and this new CDC guidance on masks. And we'll also look at which types of face coverings work best, as was suggested. So we'll do all of that with Sanjay and our Watt and Jones wrap pieces, and then obviously the other big fire inside the White House. We'll watch Trump at 11, the first time seeing him in almost a week, see which Republicans continue to enable him and his false claims of fraud, and continue to call that out, politics over country. And we'll use that sound from the Philadelphia commissioner on New Day. We'll also be watching for the latest of the Biden transition in Wilmington. We have John Brennan booked, as well as Senator Bernie Sanders. We also have the Barbara Starr piece that was mentioned on the state of the military. And then we'll continue to map out the votes in the remaining uncalled states and highlight that growing margin for Biden in the popular vote. And that's where we're starting.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Okay, so let's make sure we continue to be very focused on these two major stories of the election and transition and the assault on democracy that is going on. Let's not be afraid to call it out, call it for what it is. Don't mince our words. Let's also make sure we're focused on COVID. We have 2 5-alarm fires going at the same time. Let's stay newsy, stay urgent, and have a good day. Bye-bye.